Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my storytelling channel. I'm happy to invite you in and have you listen to my stories. I do tell a variety of stories from romance, historical, horror to sentimental, as well as share meditations here and there. Both are told in both Hmong and English, and as I'd like to share these stories with everyone and not just our Hmong community, our stories are in our culture are beautifully rooted in our folklore. So today I'd like to share with you a fictional horror romance story I wrote called The Abandoned Groom, and I hope you will enjoy it with me.
Went down crashing in my own bed. There ain't no words when you're sleeping with shame. All out and yet still wide awake. There ain't no prayer when you're sleeping on nails. When words fail you and all that you can do is look away. Yeah, and the image in my mind is burning each other down. It's pain. If you could only say it's you, always you. And baby, I'm sorry too. I twist and I turn, babe, I'm lost to my core. I'm nothing alone, it's you I adore. Please say it's you, always you.
Have you ever waited for someone? Like really waited? Time ticking again and again, the sun becoming the moon, and the moon becoming the sun again, as the heavens turn light and dark over and over. You sit through every single season, seeing the world shrivel up and die, and then see new buds forming as a rebirth of life echoes across the universe. Have you felt this? Have you waited for centuries for that one person whose smile makes the day break, and the mere presence of their nearness makes your heart swell with an expansion that physically hurts? And as the aroma of their flesh nears you, you can finally breathe, and your world becomes a vast openness of life. Have you felt this? Maybe if you have not, you will call me a crazy man with a hidden agenda, but if you know what I mean, well, whether you are a lady or a gentleman, I ache for you as you will ache for me. We are loners in this feeling, and no one knows the pain except us. We chase an invisible ghost, and just as we catch up to them, do we realize it is only a mirage. A mirage to taunt the aches of our hearts, a mirage to torture our minds, a mirage to break our souls forever. Enough rambling. Who is she, you ask? If I can speak about this person as if she is my one and only, she must be the most incredible woman in the world, right? She must have a beauty unlike any you know, and she must have the face carved by the heavens to seduce mankind. You bet she did. She had everything, except a voice. The singing angels took it from her and gifted it to others, while she carried an empty box that held silence. When she cried, it was like an agony ripping your ears because she couldn't control her sound. When she loved, she lowered her lashes and looked away while her cheeks blushed a perfect pink. When she felt pleasure, her eyes became hooded and her teeth sank into her bottom lip, drugging me. This was the woman my heart instantly fell in love with. This was the woman my soul recognized belonging to me, and this was the woman my body branded as mine. She was perfect in every way, shape, and form. Her name was Paku Daniela, but I called her Danny because I wanted her to be different when it came to me. When I met her, she was 20 years old, with long black hair down her back, two pools of chocolate brown eyes, and a smile that captivated me. And it made me sway, and when she looked at me, my heart fluttered with life. I was 21 years old, finally a man, as my father called me, and I was working a heavy metal production graveyard shift. I smelled like steel, and my hands and nails were always covered in dark stains. I kept my hair longer than most men I knew, and my father hated it. He called me Minyo Lai every chance he got, and I didn't go to college either, which made it worse. My two older brothers were master's degree graduates. One was a doctor in pharmaceutical, while the other was an optometrist. My younger sister was a nurse, and here I was, production company slaving away 10 hours a day, 4 days a week with mandatory overtime during holidays. My life was an embarrassment to my parents, and every chance my father had, he would use me as an example to my cousins. Thanks, Dad, for your vote of confidence. I know I'm a sorry excuse as your son, but I can't do school. I barely graduated high school, and I did it for you, yet you didn't even come watch me walk across the stage to receive it. You would rather attend your older son's graduate ceremony where his robe sleeves were much longer than mine, while I sat on the bleachers holding my cap and gown wondering if I was really your son. But when I met Danny, the gentleness in her heart and soul taught me to forgive my father, because he was brought up a different way than I was, and I tried to make amends with him even if he didn't accept them. Eventually, I just settled for the small I got from him instead of hearing the usual nung lai. But Danny and I, we were meant to be together, through life and death. She would be my true north, my twin flame, my forever eternal bride. But I would be forever abandoned as a groom. I just didn't know it yet.
갇혀있던 미로 속에서 마주했던 건 wall after wall, yeah. 정해진 길 찾게 되길 난 기다리지.
Lần gì? Cô sao có yếu bận nhỉ? Cô chỉ cần đỡ lời kề mu yếu nhá. My father's gruff morning voice stirred the fogged brain I had as I sat at the table drinking my morning coffee before heading to work. He was staring at the local ads in the newspaper, scanning to see for sales. His eyes were covered with huge spectacles, and what little hair he had was beginning to thin. He looked up at me, and our eyes met. I don't have a girlfriend, I said. I groaned. Oh, no, Dad. The Thai you know is not my style, okay? He slammed his hand on the table. My mother's voice booms in as she comes in carrying a plate of fried nhua, sprinkled with salt. One is lightly burnt, and I know she saved that one for me. I reach for it immediately, and she gives me a kind smile. My mother is soft-spoken, but can become quite the devil when pushed. She was a kidnapped bride, and my entire life I've heard her say that she has never loved my father one bit. Nia, thanks, I said as I stood up. I have to go to work. As I walked out the door, I heard my father said, to which my mother replied, Although the morning spat wasn't a good one, I am somewhat grateful I still have both parents to nag on me. I see some friends I know who have lost both parents fairly young, and the orphan state is not one I'd like to have. At work, I punch in, dressed into the thick overalls, and grabbed my gear heading to the production site, when I see a pair of slender legs crossed together wearing a pair of nude heels. I backed up and peeked my head in, and lo and behold, a woman with dark hair was sitting there with a magazine in her hand. Her eyes were lowered, reading the pages, and my heart immediately sank. I felt like someone punched me in the gut, and the reaction left me responding with an unattractive groan. She lowered the magazine, and our eyes met, creating a fire in the pit of my belly. Hi, I said. Are you here for someone? Before she could answer, HR Mandy Roberts walked out wearing a pale blue dress suit, and our eyes met across the room. I backed away as Mandy came to extend her hand. Hello, Daniela. I'm Mandy Roberts, the director of HR. Why don't you come back with me? I nodded and stepped away as the girl named Daniela got up and left with HR. In my head, I whispered to myself, 3 steps, and you should turn to look at me. 1, 2, 3. And her head swung to glance at me with a smile on her lips. Work is work. No matter if you are in a suit in an office or an overall on the floor, it's work. And if you are humble enough, you can still make the most out of everything you do. Here, my boss treats me just like any other guy. I wish that he could teach some of that to my dad, who will only shake hands with someone who has the initials of a doctor in front of his name. When I break for lunch, I walk to our vending machine and put in $10 worth of chips and a bottle of Coca-Cola. And as I walk back to sit down, the girl named Daniela is walking with HR, smiling. The hallway has a long corridor, and the lunch break room has these glass windows that are 10 feet high. I watched her so intensely that I tripped over a chair, and it made me pay back by squeaking an off-tune groan that had everyone turning to glance at me. "And here is our lunch break room," Mandy said as she entered. "We have vending machines available for your use and also a fridge for you to store your items. Every Friday, we clean out the fridge, so anything that doesn't have a name or an expiry date, we toss out." Daniela nodded her head, and then her eyes meet mine, and she gives me the most incredible smile before she heads back out with Mandy. Dude, she's so out of your league. I turned around to find Pong walking over with his curry and rice in a Tupperware and plastic spoons. I sit, and he starts eating as I ripped out my chip bags. "How do you know she's out of my league?" Pong wiped his mouth and laughed. "Seriously? Look at your outfit, man. And then look at her. If you hug her, you'd wrinkle that $50 blouse. Lots of chicks work on the production floor. And those chicks are all very married. Just like you, but you can't keep your eyes from checking everyone out." Pong shrugged. "I'm just looking. I'm not touching. I don't touch. You touch your wife. She's what? Expecting baby number 4 in your 6 years of marriage? Dude, slow down," I said. "You need to catch up to me. Otherwise, you'll be the old grandpa dad at prom." This was a conversation between Pong and I every single day. But beyond work, I didn't know him. He could be the neighborhood wife beater for all I knew. My life is simple. I like to keep it that way because I don't like things too crowded and hectic. Hell, my father's words are already toxic enough to my ears, and my mother's smile already breaks my heart. I lived by the rule that if someone loved me enough, they would see past my mistake and take me for who I am, and not who they wished me to be. I wasn't husband or father material, but I knew one thing. I would never become my father in any way. That night, when I returned home from work, I showered and threw my clothes in the washer. I piled my plate high with the fried wings my mother made and went to sit on the table to eat. My father was on the phone with an uncle and was talking about a gathering this coming weekend. "Ờ, uli mà lo tao cơ, ta kỳ chỉ mua đã chịu ơi, mà lấy tôi cùng nè lo nè. Ôi trời cầu tôi." As he hung up the phone, he turned to me and said, "Ta kỳ này game pa lo lo nó đó, sao một lần lại?" It wasn't even up for debate as he walked out to join my mother on the porch. What if I didn't want to go? What if I had plans? What if I wanted to rest? I finished my food and was in the middle of washing it when my younger sister came through the door, carrying her duffel bag and wearing her gym clothes. She was super thin already, but she was always working out. She wasn't dating, and she yelled at my father to get off her back about getting married. But because she was educated and became a nurse as he wanted, he often left her alone. "Lingy, you got plans for tomorrow?" Duchia asked as she dropped her keys on the counter, leaning in toward me. Her short black hair was a mess, and she smelled like socks. "Ew, how do you expect to get a man smelling like you do?" I asked. I turned off the water, and instead of wiping my hands, I shook the excess water at her, and she goes into a boxer stance mode, ready to beat the shit out of me. "Oh my God, can you be even more uglier than you are now?" she cried. I made this annoying noise as she wiped her face, and then she asked, "Seriously, answer me. Dad just told me to go help Uncle out tomorrow. If you can get him off my back, I'll go with you wherever you want me to." She smiled. "Deal." Within 5 minutes, she returned to tell me, "Okay, dress your best tomorrow because you're coming with me." I frowned. "How'd you do it?" Shrugging, she replied, "I told Dad I was taking you to find Anya."
Went down crashing in my own bed. There ain't no words when you're sleeping with shame. All out and yet still wide awake. There ain't no prayer when you're sleeping on nails. When words fail you and all that you can do is look away. Yeah, and the image in my mind is burning each other down. It's pain. If you could only say it's you, always you. And baby,
Dress your best meant wearing something that smelled decent and no stains. Dochia was totally not agreeing to my black polo t-shirt and gray pants because she said it made me look like a golfer, which I was so not it. But it was the best I could do, and after complaining and me threatening to pull out, she finally shut up and we were on the road. She didn't tell me where we were going, and as soon as we got there and I got out of the car, who should be there but the young girl I had been eyeing at my workplace? I cursed and immediately went back inside the car, and my sister came to open the door. What the hell, Ling Yi? What are you doing? She asked. Whispering, I asked, Why didn't you tell me to dress nice? Rolling her eyes in annoyance, she said, I told you to dress your best, and you chose to be a golfer today. Shh! I shoved my hands over my hair and tried untucking my shirt. Oh, like that's gonna help, she said. Shut up. She backed up, and I got out as we walked to join our friends. I knew 2 of the 6 women standing there. There were 3 other guys talking, and they waved to me but kept their distance. One of her friends, Amy, immediately jumped on my back since she and I were old friends. She was just like another sister to me. I almost didn't catch her in time as she quickly hopped back down. Oh my, look at you. You clean up quite well. She asked, making a face. Whatever, I said as I blushed. Ladies, you know my brother, Kyle, Ling Yi, and you know some of my friends, but this is Tiffany, Lu, Nze, and this is Nze's sister, Daniela Paku. Daniela, the woman I knew from work, gave me a soft smile, and then to my surprise and horror, she turned to Nze, the one beside her, and began signing something to her. They both laughed, and then she gave me a smile. I forgot to tell you, Daniela can't speak. She can hear you just fine, though, Dochia said. Paku! She waved her over and then took my hand. This is my... And then she turned to me. How do you say brother in Hmong again? I rolled my eyes and shoved my sister off. She brought her hands up to her heart and put her hands into a prayer mode. And then she extended her hand to me, and I took it. The moment she did that, my knees went weak, and I fell forward where she caught me. My sister laughed and walked off as she looked at me with concern. I'm okay. She nodded as she took a step back from me. I work with you. Again, she nodded her head and gifted me a smile. You like the job? And she nodded again. I was at a loss of words, not because she couldn't speak to me, but because I had never been this deeply affected by someone before, and I had just met her. We began walking together to join the others, and she hurried ahead to go help set up the table. Seeing her work, I decided to offer a hand when one of the guides came forward and smiled at her. Hey, what's your name? He asked. The shorter man approached them and said, Oh, that's my girlfriend's sister. She doesn't speak. The man who had spoken took a step back and asked, Oh, this was when her sister shoved him off and he lost his balance and fell, almost doing a backward somersault. You idiot! She can't speak, but she's not deaf. Have some manners. And then she looked at her boyfriend. Why did you invite such a sleazeball? The man who had fell stood up and ran to the car without looking back, while Nzo's boyfriend chased after him. I'm sorry, Daniela. Don't let what that idiot said bother you. She only nodded and continued setting up the table. Her sister walked off, and I joined her, reaching for the bag of chips she held in her hands as she grabbed a plate and began pouring some out. I'm sorry, I said. Guys are idiots. Then she looked at me. I'm an idiot, too, at times. Like now, I guess. She smiled, and the response gave me goosebumps. Then she took the bag of chips from me and extended one toward me. Are you asking me to take that? She nodded. I bent forward and took it, chewed, and made a sound of appreciation. Smiling, she grabbed a napkin and dabbed at the corner of my lips. Why, thank you. I dated women here and there, but they were just a bunch of women who I was interested in once and never again. They had really high expectations of men, and I was more on the lower end. I didn't own a nice car or worked in an office where there was air conditioning. I didn't like romance where I had to buy the girl flowers or chocolate hearts. I just wanted someone to understand me and to really know me for who I was. I wanted her to see the me that everyone rejected and didn't value. If she was going to be my wife, She had to see this before anyone and love the me that even I didn't know how to love. Perhaps it was because I wasn't the right partner. And that day at the picnic, Daniela was a breath of fresh air, something I hadn't seen in a long time, gifting me this rare sight of life that I had let go a long time ago. I wasn't sure how to respond to it because it was so foreign, yet so calming at the same time. The more I watched her laugh and twirl around on the grass, I fell deeper and deeper in love. And I didn't even know this girl. She held such a magic power over me, and I was so deeply pulled in. My sister came to sit beside me as I watched her and Ze play volleyball. Do you like her? My sister asked. I brushed it off and made a face. Go back to where you came from. Laughing, she poked at my shoulder and then she shouted loudly, Hey, Paku! My brother likes you! I shoved at her and she got up running away as Paku turned to look at me and in return, the ball she was supposed to receive hit her on the head. Oh my God! I jumped up and ran toward her as Enzo helped her to stand up and I reached her and began to inspect her. Are you hurt? Are you okay? She pulled her hand back and smiled, gently nodding her head, and then I realized everyone was looking at me. I blushed and ran out of an excuse to say when suddenly Daniela grabbed my hand and began pulling me toward her, and we walked away as the rest of them hooted after us. Do you come here often to the park? I asked. She shook her head as we continued walking together, and then she pulled into her pant pocket and took out a few small cards. She shuffled through them and gave one to me. The words, What do you like to do? Was written on there, and I smiled knowing this was her way of conversation. I handed it back to her. I am a simple man. I like fishing. Well, don't all men? She laughed. I also like farming, although my parents don't do that anymore. It's funny because my earliest memories are of my parents at the garden, and I'm helping my mother dig the dirt as she plants the seeds. I love that, but they stopped doing that a long time ago. How about you? What do you like to do? She handed me the same card and flipped it over. I began reading it. I like to travel, try new foods, and would one day love to swim with the sharks. I looked up at her. Oh my, you're adventurous. And that was how our afternoon went. She would hand me a card. I would read the question, share about it, and then I would read her answer on the back. It was one of the most incredible moments of my life. And I realized that spending that short walk with her, I had talked about myself in ways I never had with anyone who could speak before. And in that one moment where she simply showed me words of herself on cards, I was able to really share who I was. The relationship between us began to build and take shape, building from the ground up, from shared smiles, laughter, and a warmth between two souls who were misunderstood by the world. Communication with her was different, yet so refreshing that I felt as if I didn't need to say much at all. When she was close to me, I felt as if my body was reacting in a way I hadn't known before. It took all I had to control my emotions, and they were going against me. At work, I could see her walking down the corridors during lunch, and when our eyes met, she would smile. A smile that made my entire heart just simply melt. The presence of it was like the sun, and if I looked too closely, I could hurt myself. A month after we began seeing each other, I broke the news to my parents, and Dochia was sitting beside me as my father gave me the most horrid look on earth. We were in the dining room eating dinner, and my father's long silence gave me the horror I expected. "Có vừa lọ, có chừng một thái ni bắt trổ thế nào?" he asked. "Dad, she's not stupid, she just can't speak." "Hai chị tao lùi trổ了嘛? Có tí tụi này lái lầu lại con tao là tức chỉ cờ, trong hơi lực company có để đi có xe có chừng một yếu ni bắt trổ thế nên lúc này trong đi trả lời. Dad, Dochia said, "Aku tu wa halun don lingi na. She gets paid more than him. Don't call her stupid." "Để có chừng muốn thiệt tao tí tụi này bắt trổ đó có tụi nu thế à?" Dochia rolled her eyes. Whatever, Dad. She got up and walked off, leaving me with my parents. And then my mother reached over and took my hand. "Me too. Có thứ xả trong là lo?" she asked. "Nè, Ôi chà cô xin nè, chúng moi khó chơi chơi xíu được cô lên à. Giờ vì lý cha nếu như mốt chắc kỹ cần tới thì chắc kỹ nhận chia sẻ lo luôn đi. Cứ sai của tôi cứ tin cả mà. Nếu xã đen cái này nhớ luôn xin nó lo. My father stood up and slammed his hand on the table. Sẽ có như của nó kê có mà lấy mất xí là hai tên lũ con đó mà. Giờ có chuyện từ bắt chuẩn từ có thế kê, cú thế con này kê chia xí tú luôn ta. Luôn có mua chống môn tàu nè, có một đi rồi. Mi tu. Thế lũ tu nó thảm à. Sai có chuyện mà là kê, kê có gì sai đâu có. I stared at my mother. Why? So I can pretend to be as happy as you are, Mom? You tell me every single day how you hate my father and that you were never in love with him. Why can't you understand that for once in my life, I am in love with someone? She turned away from me, and I felt the guilt eat me as I let what I said settle inside my heart. I pushed my chair away from the table and walked out to join my sister sitting on the porch. She handed me a beer from her cooler, and I took it, finishing it in 2 long gulps. Are you okay? She asked. What the hell do they know about love? Look at them, miserable all their lives, and they're still forcing me to follow their damn footsteps. Dushia smirked. I know. Dad doesn't realize he's the number one reason why I'm not getting married. Turning toward her, I asked, Why? She turned to me and gave me a sad smile and replied, I don't want to be stuck like Mom. If the guy turns out to be like Dad. I'm happy the way I am, and if Dad doesn't like it, I don't care. I sacrificed my life to be a nurse for him. He owes me that much. There was a long silence between us, and I realized that I was so busy counting my own wounds, I forgot to check on hers. She was the only daughter in the family, surrounded by 3 boys, and was pushed to become something my father wanted. What did you want to be? I asked quietly after a while. She lowered her head, and I could see the small drops of tears falling from her eyes. I wanted to be a painter. I still secretly paint here and there. You know, that last weekend I was gone? She looked up at me. I lied. I told Dad that it was a nursing seminar in Chicago, but it was an art fair. I was showcasing my work, and it sold for $5,000. I felt my heart sink, and a smile spread across my face. Wow, I'm so proud of you. And then I took her hand. I'm sorry that I never knew this about you. I'm so sorry, Dochia. She patted my back and took a deep breath. It's okay. I'm gonna be okay. I just think Dad needs to get over his 1975 lifestyle. And then she turned to me. I really like Daniela. Good, because I do too. She's changed something in me. I know, she said with a deep smile of satisfaction. I can tell. And I love it, honestly. I never gave up on you, Lengi. I always thought you were the only one who could do what your heart pleased. My 2 older brothers are just not that great at disappointing Dad. More like they are afraid. I guess the only one left here is you. Stay a rebel. My father's threats didn't get me to stop seeing Danny. In fact, the more he threatened me, the more I sought her out. I wanted to protect her, and even if I had to go against my own father, I would. We spent every waking hour together, and because we worked at the same company, it was even easier. She and I began to communicate easier, and she got more comfortable around me. The first time we kissed, I wished I could capture it and put it into a box. I wanted to show it to my kids one day. The moment their mother truly became mine. Her lips were just as soft as I had expected, and when I flicked my tongue across her lower lip, she gasped and tried to pull back, but my arms went to hold her in place. Don't be afraid. Just feel. I won't hurt you. I want you to know that this is what you do to me. This is how you make me feel. This is how good I am when I'm with you, I whispered. And her body relaxed against mine, and she opened up for me. When we pulled apart, her lips were raw, her eyes shining with desire, and her breath uneven. And then she took my hand and put it on her chest, proclaiming me as hers. This moment, a man who had never shed tears, I felt them well up in my eyes as I watched her. She gave me this look of love that held me inside her soul. The moment between us was incredibly tight and nothing kept us apart. I wanted her as my wife, my bride, my forever girl. Will you marry me, Danny? The space in my car was limited, but she reached over and grabbed my neck, pulling me for a kiss that both frightened and excited me. I was breathless as my hands ran down her back and lifted the hem of her shirt, feeling the soft warmth of her flesh. Lungi, don't do this to her, my mind said to me. She deserves more her first time. I gently pushed her away, cupping her cheeks, willing her to look at me with her hooded eyes. I love you, Danny. I want you. I do so, so much. But not here. Not like this. I can't do this to you. You deserve more than the backseat of my car. But to my utter surprise and shock, her small hands reached for the belt buckle and began to undo it. And then she slid the belt through the loopholes of my jeans and crawled to the back seat where she waited for me. The seduction of her holding my belt before me with just kissed lips had me reaching her in seconds. I branded her, body and soul, lips and flesh, and my heart took her maidenhood. My soul became hers, and I recorded our pleasurable groans into my mind. I love you, Danny. You are now mine, and I will never, ever let you go. Marry me. I held Danny's hand as we walked up the sidewalk to the front door of my parents' house. Tonight, she would become my bride, in name, in spirit, and in body forever. I knocked on the door and my father opened. His eyes widened in shock and I tightened my grip on Danny's hand. "Si, cô cho nhá lò, tao có mơ được ai?" My father, tight-lipped, cleared his throat and said, "Mi tu, mà nó chỉ rong kẻ chỉ rong nhung. Có cho là tuần sai trả cái thay kì, có mà trả cái cho đùa như chỉ li." And then he turned to Danny. "Min sai, có sao tu xem mà? Lửa mà rong kẻ rong nhung cho, cũng mà món nên được ai?" He closed the door, and Danny's face broke into despair. I reached over and hugged her, holding her as she let out sobs that tore at my heart. Her gasps of breath made me angry, and I took her to my car where I helped her into the passenger side. When I got into the driver's side, I looked up to find my father watching me from the living room window. Once he saw me, he dropped the curtain and left. I got into the car and reached for her hand, holding her as she wiped her tears. "Danny, I'm sorry. I will marry you one way or another. Come on, I'll take you home and I'll bring you back tomorrow." The thing about timing is that it is never right. If you wait for the right time, it passes you by and you are left with just a memory. The following day, I woke up, prepared to bring Danny home to be my bride. But my father was nowhere to be found, and my mother was dodging my questions. My sister was gone from home, and I got into my car driving to meet Danny. I arrived at her house faster than my normal 20 minutes and knocked on the door. Nza answered, and her eyes gave me a confused look as she crossed her arms and asked, "Did you forget something?" I shook my head. "What do you mean?" "Lungi, are you crazy? You and your father just left after picking up Daniela not 15 minutes ago." The moments of fear are real, and if you have never faced them, you never know. Your heart is a mind game that beats without warning you that it may stop at any time, and you can't control when you will breathe. The world around you pulsates and pushes you in and out of a spiritual realm that you forget what your words were going to be when you finally find your voice. That was me when I began driving wildly crazy through the streets wondering where Danny could be. All Nza could tell me was that my father arrived early that morning with a man who looked like me from a distance and took Danny with him. My father had said he was bringing Danny home to marry his son, except the son that loved her was frantically searching for her everywhere. My cell phone rang, and I picked it up hearing my brother's voice telling me to come home. I swerved the car around and roared at home, my mind running with questions. When I parked the car and ran inside, my father and brother stood up to greet me. "Where is she? If you hurt her, I will kill you," I roared as I grabbed my brother's collar and slammed him against the wall. "Where is she?" "She is here," my father yelled. "你认识我的家了吗？你的头能打不谁了？个主给这个马个。" I dropped my brother and I turned around to him. "Cái tí hình lao lộ và có sinh gan chẳng li. Nung nào mua cái tí cũ, it's a cái tí cái tung cho." But as I said this, my sister came running into the house, her face written with anger and pain. She began screaming at my father and picked up a shoe, throwing it at him. He ducked, and it crashed into the living room where my mother came running out. "See? You murderer!" she cried, and then she came to me and grabbed my arms. "This was a scheme to delay you, brother. They already killed her. Zoe just called me to say that they found her sister's body by the river and she's dead." The words sent me down to my knees, and my vision blurred as I felt dizzy and began heaving out dry air. My sweet Danny. My sweet, sweet Danny. The woman I loved, the woman I yearned for. I let out a scream and charged toward my own father. The idea of taking his life was so easy for me to do, and my hands clutched around his throat, squeezing as others yelled for me to stop. I wanted to kill him until he was just as lifeless as Danny, until I felt my pain disappear, until my world was at a standstill of peace again. "Mito," my father whispered. "Go. Chỉ có tụi tôi."
갇혀있던 미로 속에서 마주했던 건 wall after wall, yeah. 정해진 길 찾게 되길 난 기다.
I wasn't sure how I ended up in my car, parked at the river, where the first time I made love to Danny. My memory was faint, and my head hurt, as if it had been slammed into the wall, and I was feeling like I had ran a marathon with my lungs hung outside of my body. I coughed, and it hurt. My hands were shaking, and I saw that little blood spots were visible on them. What the hell happened? Danny. Danny! And then I pushed open the door and I got out to the river. The water splashing against my jeans as I screamed her name. The sun was warm against me as I tried to figure out what was going on. "Lengi," a soft, unrecognized voice said behind me, and I turned around to find Danny standing there with her long black hair, her gentle eyes, and her hands outstretched toward me. "Did you just say my name?" I asked. She nodded. "Come here." I walked to her and she took my hand, pulling me toward her. My eyes filled with tears, and I didn't know what to say as she smiled at me. "Are you surprised I can talk?" I nodded. "Here, in this realm, I can be anything you wish me to be." I frowned. "Realm? What do you mean?" I turned to look around, but she held my chin in place. "Don't look," she whispered. "Look at me. Just me." So I did, and I watched her eyes hold my image so clearly and so full of love that my heart constricted. My tears fell, and I let out a sob as I pulled her into my arms, feeling her body against mine. This woman, every part of her, I loved her so dearly that my entire being ached just being near her. "I love you so much," I cried as I pulled away and touched her face. "I'm so sorry about what my father did to you. I want you to know that I was not a part of it. I didn't know anything about it." Danny's beautiful face broke into a smile and she touched my cheek. "I know, Lengi. I know. Don't blame yourself. It's not your fault. I love you too, more than you will ever know." You are the first person who has ever loved me the way I am and never wanted me to change any part of myself. Being with you has been the greatest gift life ever gave me." She reached to hold me again, and the strange scent that came from her was not the scent I always knew. I pushed her back and noticed that her eyes were a bit dull, and her skin wasn't glowing as it used to. "Danny, are you all right?" I asked. "Why does this feel like a dream to me?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she let out a sob. "How do you remember me?" "Remember you? What do you mean? When you think of me, what comes to your mind?" Smiling, I replied, "You, Danny. You're like the dew on a flower in the early morning dawn, when life has just risen and the sun has just come out of hiding. The dew that is filled with promise of a new chapter, a new beginning. And as the sun comes to kiss you, the dew turns into the beat of a heart against the petal, giving it life to stay young forever. That is what I think of when I think of you." Tears streamed down her face, and she lowered her gaze before she whispered, "When you find me again, say that to me, and I will be yours." And when she lifted her head to look up at me again, I saw that her skin had turned an ashen gray, almost pale white, making her eyes bulge. Broken veins scattered across her cheeks from fighting to breathe. I gasped and stepped backwards, my heart hammering against my chest, as I watched her hands curl from slender into tiny little nubs. "What happened to you?" I asked, and then I felt the soft gushing of liquid on my neck, and the warmth of it spilled down my chest. I gasped as a river of crimson shade began bleeding down the front of me. I reached up to touch my neck and felt my throat had been slit wide open. As I tried to come to terms about what happened, a woman with long white hair appeared, wearing a golden gown, and she came to stand between us. "My son, you cannot leave this place as you took your own life with your own hands. Forever and eternity, you shall stay here until the age of your human form passes up before you can be gifted a chance to be reborn," she said. "But her," she said, pointing to Danny, "she's going to be reborn soon. Right now, as we speak, a pregnant woman is in labor, ready to birth a new life. Your bride will be leaving you as she is ready to rewrite her life." I dropped to my knees and I watched as Danny came to kneel before me. Her face renewed, the grayish tone gone, but her skin was beginning to fade. "No," I said as I reached for her, but I couldn't touch her. "Danny, you can't abandon your groom. You can't." Danny began sobbing, her tears streaming down her face. "I will think of you, Leej Yim, as I am rebirthed into the world. I will remember your kindness and the way how your eyes crinkle at the corners when you smile. I will remember how you worked so hard and eat so little because you had no one to care for you. I will remember how your lips felt against mine when we first kissed, and how you made my body come alive with your every embrace. I will remember everything with you, Leej Yim." "Don't leave me," I cried. "Danny, don't leave me. I love you. Don't leave me." "My son, the cost of taking your own life is this. In due time, you shall be together again. But she will have been reborn many times before you are released. If her memory can store you in her mind, she will remember you. If her memory forgets you, today, this very moment, is the last she will think of you." She turned to Danny and extended a hand. "My child, come. It is time to meet your new parents." This place, the lake, it was where I sat in my car and slit my own throat after learning what my father had done to Danny. I came here because this was where we first made love, I came here to vow never to leave this place, and I came here to bury myself. Every day I remain the same, and every day I see different people walk past me. I can hear them argue over stupid things. Sometimes I see them love each other like how Danny and I used to love one another, and my heart breaks because since she left me, I haven't seen her since. I went to visit my father, sitting in prison, wearing orange, a color not suited for him. At his age, he wouldn't survive long in there, and I hated the man. He had grown older and had more white hair than I remembered. He looked up at me one time and our eyes met briefly, but he looked right past me as he bumped shoulders with the man next to him, and he started a fight, beating my father into a bloody pulp. I just stood and watched as my father's grunts of pain begged for help. "Dì, vì lý kìa? Vì lý kìa có sẽ phễu lùa?" I asked, and my father's cries for help just got louder and louder as his flesh was broken and blood began pouring out in gushes. Finally, a warden came to stop the fight, and they brought my father back to the medical ward for healing. When he was on the hospital bed, he looked up at a corner, and he began speaking. "Cú bao cái nó cú cờ mi đâu, cái sao tu share cú, cú yên vật sầu lo hình vì cú share phe, kiệt gì cú ở sư, nếu từ cú tua cú ngã cái phe nó cú mù, cái sao chỉ có tu ti lâu, vì tu yêu cái yêu cú yêu cái nữ công tên nó cú, sát tay tua cái tu lông câu, yêu cú." And in an angry voice, I yelled, The energy pushed a vase into the room, and my father shut his eyes, tears falling down his cheeks. I slammed my fists into the wall, the sound echoing across the room, and my father began sobbing. "Mi tu của thoát xìa, giờ của là cháu chỉ kiện trên nó có thể của chuyện gì tu." I walked to him and bent down to whisper in his ears. "Nú từ có tua, yo chỉ mong từ lại đau được có lỡ của gì. Có ở từ mi tu và có cái kia xé cái từ mình chân cái chia ta. Nú có cái mua cái nú có yo trái có yo khí có yo quốc bảo muôn tỷ." And my father's sobs roared as I backed out of the room. The lake, the place of peace for me as I wait for my time to end, hoping and wishing that one day I would get to be reunited with my dear Danny again. I haven't seen her since the last time. My heart remembers her laughter, her smile, and most importantly, her love. When the sun peaks from the horizon, it is her grazing me with her love. When the rainbow appears after the rain, it is her gifting me with her smile. When the moon appears in the sky, it is her peering down on me with her gentleness. My dear Danny, I never wanted to abandon you, but I promise you that I will forever wait and be patient as time passes, whether painfully slow or wickedly fast. I shall forever wait for you, for my eternal bride, to return to her abandoned groom. And then, 3 centuries, 300 years, 109,000 days, 3,600 months, 15,000 weeks later, I arrived at the hospital under the name Gomingya, born at just under 8 pounds, to a woman named Micah and a man named Leej. As I was placed in the bassinet in the nursery wardroom, I heard the cry of a little girl beside me, her aching, painful cry so heartbreaking that it made me stop crying to listen. And then I began to coo to her, and her cry silenced to a mere whisper of a gasp. The nurse came to touch her cheeks. "Oh, Danny, you're going to be okay. I'll be back with a bottle for you." And I placed my hand on the side of the bassinet, and I felt her energy connect with me. "Danny," I thought, "I finally found you." And when time chases us to a mere 18 years of age, I see a beautiful girl holding a firecracker stick, glowing in the dark. She has long, dark black hair and 2 chocolate pools of brown eyes. She turned to me and our eyes meet. She smiles and she says, "I love fireworks, don't you?" I replied, "I do." And then she grabs my hand and asks, "When you look at me, what do you see?" And I replied, "You're like the dew on a flower in the early morning dawn, when life has just risen and the sun has just come out of hiding. The dew that is filled with promise of a new chapter, a new beginning. And as the sun comes to kiss you, the dew turns into the beat of a heart against the petal, giving it life to stay young forever. This is what I see when I look at you." Her eyes glistened with tears and she whispered, "I feel like I've heard that somewhere a long time ago." "I'm Danny. And you are?" I took her hand. "I'm yours." Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to my story called The Abandoned Groom. I hope that you enjoy this with me. I will see you in the next episode.
Went down crashing in my own bed. There ain't no words when you're sleeping with shame. All out and yet still wide awake. There ain't no prayer when you're sleeping on nails. When words fail you and all that you can do is look away. Yeah, and the image in my mind is burning each other down.